Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Wellness in the Workplace, Breaking the Burnout Cycle. I'm Matt Howard, our HR supervisor here at Dominion Payroll, and we're so glad to have you with us today. We're going to be exploring the real mental and physical impacts of burnout, and more importantly, how to break the cycle. We're excited to be joined by Taylor Steffan, a licensed social worker and therapist, who will share valuable tools and strategies to help you better manage stress and support overall wellness in the workplace. Before we get started, just a quick note, this session is going to be recorded and you'll receive a copy of the recording after the presentation. If you do have any questions, please feel free to drop them in our questions chat and we will get them to them at the end. With that though, let's go ahead and jump into it. Welcome, Taylor.
Thank you so much, Matt. Thank you so much, Matt. It's a pleasure to be here today. So let's just dive in because we have a lot to cover today. So you can see the slides there, Wellness in the Workplace, Breaking the Burnout Cycle. Again, I'm Taylor. I am a therapist and a lawyer. Not currently practicing law, but practicing as a therapist and doing a lot of working with people who are in challenging workplaces, law or otherwise, with managing the mental health toll that takes. So let's dive into it. Today is intended to be very practical and very hands-on about things that you can do, take with you, start using as soon as this afternoon to manage some of the stressors in the workplace, manage burnout if you're already there, prevent it if you're not. So a quick agenda. We're doing the introduction now, so there we go. We are going to talk about some common mental health challenges at work, some terms you may be hearing on social media, on TV, among your friends, but really defining them and talking about what they actually mean and what to look out for. Then the meat of our time together will be on strategies for coping and self-care. How do we prevent our mental health from deteriorating as a result of workplace stress? What do we do to take care of ourselves despite the challenges of the modern workplace? We'll take a quick pause in the middle of that to do a mindfulness exercise, just because I think the term mindfulness gets thrown around quite a bit today. And what does that actually mean? So we'll do a quick practice in the middle, come back to talking about strategies for self-care and coping. Then I have some great resources if you want to dive in deeper, if you want to get some more help. Where do you go from there? And of course, the slides will be available to you afterwards, so no need to jot everything down that's on there. And then we'll save some space for some question and answers. That's our agenda. So the quote here that I have, I guess it's not a quote, but just the excerpt from that study here. When comparing employee mental health across several high stress professions, studies consistently showed higher rates of PTSD symptoms, and we'll talk about what that looks like, and psychological distress in fields where employees did not receive mental health training or support. So not to be too self-congratulatory, but it's wonderful that you're here because as that study shows, just learning about mental health, the warning signs, what to do, that's a huge step forward in managing workplace stress because you know what you're looking for. On a personal level, so I've had two kind of high stress careers. I was a big law attorney at a law firm in DC and then one in Richmond, where I'm coming to you live from, for several years. And then I worked as I got my master's in social work and worked in the social work field as a therapist. Before now I'm in private practice, doing executive coaching and therapy. But I was at a agency in Henrico, Virginia, a wonderful agency, Safe Harbor, that works with survivors of domestic and sexual violence and human trafficking. So both of those settings probably considered super high stress, big law attorney, and then working with survivors of pretty serious trauma. And I will say the way that mental health was approached in both of those employment contexts was extremely different. So this quote that this excerpt that I posted from this study actually looked at lawyers versus people in healthcare. And the distinguishing factor that they found that is echoed in my personal experience is that lawyers were much more burnt out, had much higher rates of PTSD, not because their job was any more stressful than the people working in healthcare, working in social work, working with trauma all day, every day, but it was because in the law, the way that mental health was dealt with, not every place, not every employer, certainly not to make generalizations, but at least as the study showed, it was sort of like buck up, buttercup, and just keep going. The employers didn't talk about mental health. There weren't strategies built into the workplace for managing burnout. Conversely, in the high stakes, high stress healthcare profession, people were trained on what to look out for. Employers looked out for mental health of their employees, and that is what the researchers accounted for the difference between the mental health status in the two professions. So I think that's pretty powerful, and it shows that it's right to be talking about this because it does actually make a difference. Okay, so defining our terms just to make sure we're on the same page about what we're looking out for. Burnout. Exhaustion, depersonalization, reduced personal accomplishment, and cynicism due to work requiring intense emotional involvement with clients over time, culminating in occupational exhaustion. So occupational exhaustion, just the idea that you're not just normal tired, you're just not normal stressed, you are having trouble engaging with your work at the level that you were previously. As a result of the volume of it, the intensity of it, the repeated nature of it, in some cases, the emotional involvement with your clients or your boss or your colleagues or the general public, people who are really going through stressful times, it can be a little bit contagious. So occupational exhaustion, when I use the term burnout, that's what I tend to mean. Trauma, again, thrown around all over social media today, event or series of events that induces an overwhelming actual or perceived sense of threat to physical or psychological security. So a really scary thing that happens to you that you internalize and it stays with you. So when I think about trauma, two people can be in the exact same car accident. Hypothetically, let's imagine they're both drivers. Major car accident, they both walk away. For one of those people, they get in the car the next day and they're like, that was really scary, but I'm good. And maybe they think about it again, but they don't think about it in a psychologically threatening way. They're not having flashbacks. They're not having nightmares. They're not head on a swivel while they're driving, moving forward. The other person in the other car, maybe it's different. Maybe that car accident does count as trauma for them because it stays with them in a negative way. They have a hard time shaking it off. So trauma looks different for different people. Different experiences can be trauma for one person and not for the other. But that's what we mean when we're talking about it. Oop, skipped ahead. Vicarious trauma. So same thing, except it's that you've witnessed it, you've engaged with it, you've heard about it, you've even read about it, and you're having the reaction as though it happened to you. So I mentioned prior role as a social worker before I was in private practice was at an agency dealing with domestic and sexual violence. Of course, most of my clients were firsthand survivors of trauma. Something to look out for myself professionally and for many of you, depending on the nature of your work, is vicarious trauma when you're interacting with people who are in high stress or even traumatic scenarios, and it's starting to impact you as though it happened to you. Symptoms can include, and these are things to look out for, mood swings, social isolation, hypervigilance, which is that head on a swivel, you are always looking for the next danger, PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. Sometimes we will use the phrase secondary traumatic stress, same thing as vicarious trauma. And then compassion fatigue, a lot like burnout, a lot like vicarious trauma. It can also refer to perceived lack of empathy for others due to exhaustion. So perhaps you're in a customer service role, and whatever it is that your product, that your service that you are in customer service for, it's really important to people. It's high stakes stuff. And you deal with your customers all day, every day. And when you first start, you are really empathetic. You genuinely are hoping to help and you feel their pain and you want to make things better. Over time, compassion fatigue it's really hard for you to maintain that compassion. You're less empathetic about their experience. You're maybe quicker to irritability. You have a harder time relating to whoever you're dealing with. That's probably compassion fatigue. We as humans are only so finite. There's only so much that we can take of emotional distress for ourselves or for others before our brain, to protect ourselves, kind of walls it off. And sometimes in the workplace, it can look like compassion fatigue. These are just things to look out for. And these are terms we might use today as we keep talking. So good to have this level playing field of what we mean. So workplace stressors. Why? This may be a dumb question for those of you who are stressed at work all the time, or at least a lot of the time. Why is work so stressful? Let's just name some of the obvious things. And sometimes I do this presentation and we have a chat function and people shout them out. So in your office, in your home office, wherever you are, if you want to shout them out to yourself, You can feel free. You can write them on your little notebook, whatever it is, or just keep it in the brain. But be thinking about this. What are the stressful things in your workplace? For a lot of people, interpersonal challenges, number one here, is number one. This is what makes work hard. Other people, the state of being human. So you might have a boss who's a micromanager or who's completely absent, leaving you on your own with little to no guidance. You might work with colleagues or have people who report to you who test your patients, but there's very little that you can do about it. The general public often is a source of interpersonal challenges in many, many different workplaces. If you're in sales, retail, you're interacting with the average person. And there's been a lot of media attention lately about how since COVID, since full-fledged COVID of 2020, the general public has less empathy for employees with whom they interact. And so that can be a big stressor. Competing stakeholders. Gone are the days here of reporting to a single boss with clear and simple expectations. Wouldn't life be great if your job was as straightforward as that? But most of the time in today's working world, regardless of the sector that you're in, you are dealing with competing expectations, reporting to multiple people. There may be legal or ethical frameworks that you have to navigate, even if you're not trained in it. Politically, the landscape of your workplace may be changing. I gave a little bit of a presentation like this with a few months ago now, I don't know, a few weeks ago, to a group of professionals who represented school districts, public school districts across the country. And it was a professional organization. And 2 days before my presentation, the administration of the federal government had announced that they were dismantling the Department of Education. So when we talk about the changing political frameworks in which people are working, for better or for worse, not making any commentary on that political change, but it had profound professional implications for the people I was speaking with, and they had no control over it, and they were dealing with the fallout of that. That's not uncommon, whatever it looks like in your particular role or sector, that you've just got to navigate things outside of your control. Heavy workloads. So obviously this is not rocket science here. The correlation between vicarious trauma and longer work hours is a positive one. So the more you work with populations or people who are going through it or just stressful work experiences, the harder it is to maintain your own mental health. It makes a lot of sense. Your brain and your body and your nervous system needs a break from stress to recover and to be able to handle it next time it comes. But the more you work, the harder it is to come by those breaks. And most people I know who consider themselves career oriented, that 40-hour work week is a bit of a myth. Fortunately, some people still get to work it, but for many people, they're working much more than that, and that's the expectation. And even if they're not working, they're answering emails, they're responsive, they're available, and that does have a kind of corrosive impact on mental health if not checked. Economic challenges. So a lot of people are working a lot for stagnant wages. Cost of living very high, so people may be taking on more second careers, weekend jobs, whatever it is to deal with the cost of living in the United States. The trend has definitely been well documented. We don't need to get into it, but that can make working more stressful. If the stakes of losing your job are very high, then the stakes of the stressors you experience in the workplace feel a lot higher, and in actuality are a lot higher. So that can have an impact here. So I have on my screen there, what else? This is where you're thinking about it. Everybody's got something in front of mind that's like, yeah, this is the worst thing about my job, and this is what keeps me up at night. It's legitimate and it's real. And the theme here about everything you're thinking and everything we've just discussed is most of it is out of your control. So it would be a different sort of webinar if we were saying, how do you mitigate these things? How do you decrease the hours you work? How do you make it so you don't have to deal with the changing landscape in which your career sits? You probably don't. If I had that magic wand, I would be a very wealthy woman. But instead, we've got to deal with the reality on hand, recognizing these, validating them, and then what do we do about it? And here we are. What do we do about it? Oh, just kidding. I got ahead of myself. We have one more doom and gloom slide, which is, what does this mean? So we're stressed at work. How does that actually impact us? Sure, we talk about sleepless nights. We talk about that sort of stressed feeling in your body. But unfortunately, the impact is a little bit more permanent and a little bit more serious than that. So mental health wise, right? In professions that are stressful, we see elevated rates of clinical depression and anxiety. You may see social isolation and negative impact on your interpersonal relationships, high rates of substance abuse in professions that are demanding but don't recognize the importance of mental health, or at least explicitly. PTSD, symptoms like hyperarousal or numbness. So on one hand, you are always ready for a fight. You're never relaxed in your body. That's hyperarousal. Numbness is the opposite, sort of having a dumbed down reaction to stressors in your life, almost to the point where you're not really experiencing it. You might be disassociated. You're just having a numb response. Nightmares, panic attacks, difficulty concentrating. These are sort of the bread and butter initial warning signs of PTSD. And then burnout, compassion fatigue, vicarious trauma, especially again in professions that do not place a value on employee well-being. Physically, we've got some short-term physiological effects: insomnia, weight gain or loss, stomach or head pains. And then when we get to the longer-term things, there is a very, very strong correlation between major medical issues that are really prevalent in the United States, like cardiac diseases, cancer, and strokes. They correlate really strongly with workplace stress. So that's my doom and gloom, only setting the stage to say it matters that we get this right, and it matters that we think about how to do better when it comes to ourselves, our employees, people working in our business. So step one, what do we do? You're already doing it: identifying and managing symptoms, learning to recognize the early symptoms, the early signs that we talked about, the ones that seem to be the easiest to measure, as in it's really obvious to you when this starts happening. Changes in sleep or appetite. Suddenly you're sleeping all the time, suddenly you're sleeping not at all. Same thing with eating. Suddenly your diet has changed a lot and you're eating much more or much less. Irritability. Now, people aren't great at catching irritability in themselves, but you know who's great in catching irritability? Your family and your friends. So this is where we all get a little bit accountable to each other and our colleagues with looking out for personality changes for the worse. Withdrawal from hobbies and relationships. So I am not at all naive that work sometimes means that these things fall away. So it is not, hey, I have a deadline of a big presentation next week and I can't go to yoga tonight because I've got to prepare. That's not a warning sign. The warning sign is I haven't gone to yoga in 6 months because I've been too stressed about work. And it's really important to me that I go, and I just haven't gone. There's your warning sign and something to look out for. So when you work in an environment where you have colleagues that you can have this kind of great relationship with, there's the first line of defense. You look out for this for each other, and you also talk about the difficult things at work. So sometimes we're encouraged to not gossip, not gab at work with our colleagues. Yes, of course, not here for workplace gossip, but understanding that there's a difference between that and actually verbalizing some of the stressors that you have, especially when they amount to something like trauma or dealing with truly life or death difficult situations for people that you work with. Verbalizing it, getting it out rather than having it sit just inside your brain, research has really shown that can protect from you internalizing it and experiencing vicarious trauma. Some workplaces that makes more sense than others, but if you are someone who's in healthcare, who's practicing family law so that you're dealing with custody and major custody disputes, or you work in the field of immigration and the stakes for the people that you're working with are particularly high. These are the kind of things that better out than in. If you're sitting on it, stewing on it, that's when you see that vicarious trauma emerge. Building wellness into your work routine. So if you are in the beautiful position of being a supervisor or an employer of some sorts, you are in an excellent position to really integrate this into part of your management. So if you have a quarterly team meeting, taking time within that quarterly team meeting to have a little bit of education about this, a little bit of a check-in with your employees. If you have weekly one-on-ones with people who you know are going through a high stress scenario, not just the question of where are we on this, but how are you handling this? It doesn't have to take up a lot of time, but that quick question is a protective strategy against having employee burnout. Quarterly self-care events at employers, balance of high and low stress tasks. What I like about this one is many employees, particularly many, people who work at a desk all day, have the ability to own some of this a little bit. Not everybody does, but if you are the kind of employee where you have a set of tasks that you need to get through in a given day, and you're autonomously sort of granted the ability to manage them within that, this is a place that you can really do some work for yourself. So balance of high-low stress tasks, you have something where you feel yourself, you're stressed about it. Your muscles tense, you're shorter of breath, you're thinking about it outside of work hours. This is a high stress task for you. The stakes are high, whatever it may be. If you get through a period where you are focused on that, finding a little break in the day, maybe you have a meeting at noon that you're feeling that way about, it's a high stress thing, then building into your calendar that afternoon, you're not bugging off of work completely, but you are intentionally taking some of more of your routine, more of your run-of-the-mill, less high-stakes work and building it into your calendar so that your nervous system gets the break that it needs to recover from the high-stress morning. Not everybody is in control of this, of course, but to the extent that you are, it's a quick way to make sure that you're managing your own mental health. Mindfulness and grounding. So when you're feeling physical signs of stress, you've got to prioritize restabilizing, your nervous system before returning to problem solving. So I am not a neurologist. I am certainly not some brain surgeon or anything. But so here's a quick, possibly oversimplified, certainly high level overview of stress in your brain. Two quick parts of your brain that are really important. Your frontal lobe. The frontal lobe is the part of the human brain that makes us the top of the food chain. It is where you can think about the past, present, future. You can think about cost benefit analysis, actions have consequence, measuring risks, making analytical decisions. Our frontal lobe is very, very smart. It doesn't really develop all the way till we're 25, which is why teenagers are the way that they are. But your frontal lobe is the boss. It makes you a really good employee in most workplaces. Another part of your brain, and we are not here to talk smack on the amygdala, it is very valuable, but the amygdala, less good as an employee most of the time. The amygdala, sometimes people refer to it as your lizard brain. It's what a lot of scientists think first developed in humans. It is where your fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response lives. So we're cavemen. We're in our cave with our families. There's a lion at the mouth of the cave. Our amygdala is the quickest way that our brain responds. So it has a faster reaction time than our frontal lobe. It sees the lion, it says, I'm the boss now, I know what to do. Either I'm going to fight that lion and protect my family. So your heart rate may increase, your pupils may get bigger to let more light in, you are ready to fight, your muscles are tense. Maybe your amygdala says, nah, actually flight. We're going to run away. We're going to grab the baby and run past the lion. So again, your body, your blood starts pumping, you're ready to run. Freeze. Actually, your amygdala says, nope, the best way to stay safe here is I'm going to play dead. My breath is going to get slower. I'm going to lie down and play dead so that this lion doesn't bother me and my family. And then fawn is the last one. Fawn as in, I'm actually going to try to domesticate that lion and make that lion my friend so that it doesn't harm me. And how I'm going to do it, this analogy really gets stretched when it comes to the lion. But when the threat is human, a lot of times you see this with people who are kidnapped, and how they keep themselves safe is they compliment the kidnapper. This is your amygdala in action, keeping you safe when there's a lion at the mouth of the cave. So wonderful. We appreciate our amygdala. Humans would not be here if we didn't have that safety and security response, and it acted so quickly and so assertively in our bodies. However, what's happened is there's no lion for most of us. There's no lion in the mouth of the cave. There's a passive-aggressive email from a colleague. There's a text message from your boss that has weird punctuation. There's a deadline that got moved, or you forgot the deadline. Or for some of us, when we're really deep into work stress, it's just the sound of a ding in our email from our inbox when we're already overwhelmed. What's happening sometimes, especially as we approach burnout, is our amygdala is like, lion, and has the response as though the lion is there. But it's not, it's just an email or whatever else. When your amygdala is in fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, you have a physical reaction that is not appropriate to the threat at hand. And you may be experiencing early signs of panic or that heart rate or those pupils or that sweating, whatever it is to get ready to fight the lion. And it's not actually going to help you when it's just an email. And the part of your brain that really would know how to deal with the email, the frontal lobe, is offline. The amygdala has taken over, the frontal lobe is not engaged. I say all this, this very, very extended metaphor about the lion, because as employees, if we want to do the best work that we possibly can in the workplace, we need to recognize, oh, I'm having a fight or flight reaction. I've got to come back into my frontal lobe so that I can actually assess this accurately, calmly, rationally, smartly. Smartly is not a word. Wisely, we'll say. Maybe smartly is a word. Anyway, so grounding techniques is how we bring our frontal lobe back online and come back from our amygdala. So really, really key thought is our five senses are very key to coming back to our frontal lobe. So sight, smell, taste, sound, and touch. When we are doing one of those five things, it brings our nervous system back to the present because it's reminding us we're in the here and now, and it's taking stock of the fact that there is actually no lion, so that your amygdala can calm down and you can think like a top of the food chain employee in your frontal lobe, which is going to serve you better. So how do we do it? We engage our five senses. Remember those old slapstick comedies where somebody's freaking out and somebody throws a bucket of water on them or slaps them in the face? I am not asking you to throw a bucket of water on yourself or to slap yourself in the face, but the logic behind that actually carries the day, which is remind your body using your senses, shocking your system that you're here. So for some people, a really, really sour candy can do it because it's like, ooh, all I can focus on is the taste of this candy. Amygdala chills out, realizes there's no lion, and you're thinking rationally again. That's why aromatherapy works. That's why when we have really, maybe if you're allowed to, fire code wise in your office, have a nice candle or some other source of scent that's really pleasant to you. I do not recommend a really unpleasant scent, but it would actually serve the same function because it still shocks the system. Other things to do. Getting outside, people are always talking about go outside and take a quick 5-minute walk. Why does that work? A, change of scenery is always great, but think about the senses that get activated when you go outside. Suddenly you're smelling new smells, you're feeling new feelings, you're hearing new sounds, you're certainly seeing new things. You're really engaging all five senses, and it's bringing you back to the present and de-escalating your nervous system out of fight or flight into a more rational thought process. Meditation is a very sophisticated version of this. It takes some practice. I meet with, in my own therapy and coaching practice, I meet with executives, professionals all the time who's like, it doesn't work for me. I get it. It doesn't work for you the first few times you do it. But it is sort of a advanced version of mindfulness where you quiet the noise around you, acknowledge the thoughts that you're having, focus on the present so intensely that it is impossible to be in fight or flight. Something to work towards. There's great apps that can help you with it, Calm and Headspace, and you can do the beginner short ones. What I like about it is you can do a 5-minute version of it and at work, and everybody's got 5 minutes, right? It's a bathroom break to reset your nervous system if you find yourself having an outsized reaction to a stressor at work. The last bullet here, take breaks. You cannot do your best work in fight or flight. Certainly, I really, really stand by that. If you need to think about it not selfishly, although selfish is welcome as well, if you need to think about it selflessly, you're going to do a bad job if you're in panic mode, right? And so in service of our employers and doing good work for our clients, for whomever, let's take a break when we're feeling escalated and dysregulated because of our amygdala. So practicing. The next slide here, we're going to do a little bit of a mindfulness exercise. So once we get started on this, you'll find that I'm going to come off camera, mostly because it's just kind of weird. Like I'm going to read a script here involving progressive muscle relaxation, which I'll explain. And my hope for you is that you're really going to engage in this 5-minute quick calming exercise. And in doing so, you might close your eyes. You might, if you have an office door, you might close it. You sit comfortably. If you notice that you're hunched over, if you're holding your phone and answering text messages during this webinar, I don't blame you, but this might be the time to take the break from it and really sit squarely. What I would recommend is you have both feet on the ground. We talk about mindfulness, grounding, those exercises. It's literally grounding. Feel the floor underneath you, which can have a calming effect. The one that I've chosen to do today is like a little model one, is progressive muscle relaxation twofold. It's great of calming your nervous system and getting back into the frontal lobe. It's also really great because many modern employees spend most of their work time hunched over at a desk, hunched over their phone, hunched over their laptop, whatever it is. And that has a toll on our muscles. And it's a little bit of a cyclical thing. Stress can cause us to tense our muscles. Makes sense. We're getting ready to fight the lion. But when you have muscles that are tight from stress, sometimes you're hunched over. Hunching over makes it worse. So we have a vicious cycle here. So we're going to focus on sort of a body muscle progressive relaxation here to kind of fight both of those things at once. So I'm going to go ahead and go off camera for a second, just so if you open your eyes, you're not looking at me weirdly during that time. And I'm going to go ahead and read us a little bit of a progressive muscle relaxation practice. Okay. So progressive muscle relaxation is an exercise that reduces stress and anxiety in your body by having you slowly tense and then relax each muscle. This exercise can provide an immediate feeling of relaxation, but it's best to practice it frequently. With experience, you'll become more aware of when you're experiencing tension, and you'll have the skills to help you relax, for instance, in the middle of the workday or before a stressful meeting or after a stressful meeting. During this exercise, each muscle should be tensed, not to the point of strain. We're not trying to hurt ourselves here. And if you have any injuries or pain, you can skip that affected area. Pay special attention to the feeling of releasing tension in each muscle and the resulting feeling of relaxation. So let's begin. You're sitting down. You can lie down if you want to, if you're somebody who has the space to do that. If not, you're sitting in your chair, you're fine. Shut your eyes if you're comfortable doing so. Begin by taking a deep breath and noticing the feeling of air filling your lungs. Hold your breath for a few seconds. Release the breath slowly and let the tension leave your body. Take in another deep breath and hold it. Again, slowly release the air. Even slower now. Take another breath, fill your lungs, hold the air. Slowly release the breath and imagine the feeling of tension leaving your body. Now, we're going to move our attention to our feet. Begin to tense your feet by curling your toes and the arch of your foot. Hold the tension and notice what it feels like. Okay, now we're going to release the tension in your foot. Notice the new feeling of relaxation. Next, begin to focus on your lower leg. Tense the muscles in your calves, hold them tightly, and pay attention to the feeling of tension. Okay, now you release the tension from your lower legs. Again, the point here is to notice the feeling of relaxation. Remember to keep taking those deep breaths. For some people, it works to go in through your nose, out through your mouth, but whatever's feeling good for you. Next, you're going to tense the muscles of your upper legs. You can do this by tightly squeezing your thighs together. Make sure you feel tenseness without going to the point of strain. And now you can release. Feel the tension leave your muscles. Begin to tense your stomach and chest. You can do this by sucking your stomach in. Squeeze harder and hold the tension. A little bit longer. Now you can release it. Allow your body to go limp in your chair as best you can. Let yourself notice the feeling of relaxation. Continue taking deep breaths. Breathe in slowly, noticing the air fill your lungs and holding it. Release the air slowly. Now feel it leaving your lungs. Now we're going to tense the muscles in our backs by bringing your shoulders together behind you. This is where a lot of people carry the tension, so this one can be the most important one. Hold them tightly. Tense them as hard as you can without straining or pain. Keep holding. Okay, now release the tension from your back. Feel the tension slowly leaving your body and the new feeling of relaxation. Notice how different your body feels when you allow it to relax. Now we're going to tense our arms all the way from the hands to the shoulders. You can make a fist, squeeze all the way up, flex your bicep, hold it. Okay, now we're going to release the tension from your arms and shoulders. Notice the feeling of relaxation in your fingers, hands, arms, shoulders. Notice how your arms feel limp and at ease. Move up to your neck and your head. Tense your face and your neck by distorting the muscles around your eyes and mouth. You may be making a funny face here. We're off video, we're fine. Okay, release the tension. Again, we're noticing the new feeling of relaxation. Finally, the culmination here, right? We're going to tense our entire body. Tense your feet, legs, stomach, chest, arms, head, and neck. Tense harder without straining, without pain. Hold it there. Okay, now we're going to release. Allow your whole body to go limp if you can. Pay attention to the feeling of relaxation and how different it is from the feeling of tension. Begin to wake your body up by slowly moving your muscles. Adjust your arms and legs. Stretch your muscles. Open your eyes when you're ready. And I'm coming back off video. I appreciate y'all engaging with me with that in the middle of your workday. I know it can be a little bit weird. My hope is that you're feeling a new feeling of relaxation. You can do that. There are apps, there are YouTube videos, there are scripts online where you can actually walk yourself through it. But it's the kind of thing that you can do in your own head, in your office, at work, in the bathroom, on a walk to your car, whatever it works, in your own head, eventually in time. And you don't have to go all the way through using every part of the body like I did. You can just do your back if that's where you're feeling it. It is very, very hard to be in fight, flight, freeze, or fawn when you are intentionally relaxing your muscles. Something about it gives your nervous system a break, brings you back online, and makes you the better version of yourself as a human and an employee by doing that. So something to try, something, thanks for humoring me. And we are back to strategies. So everybody's favorite buzzword, self-care. Prioritize self-care while balancing a demanding workload. If only it were that easy, right? So for everybody, self-care looks a little bit different. Exercise, a real common one, time with loved ones, reading, journaling, gardening, cooking, art. I do not care what self-care is for you. There's a lot, if you're somebody who's on social media, you'll see a lot of like, oh, I got my nails done, that was self-care. And it's a little bit poo-pooed of like, that's not what self-care is, but it actually is. If for you, it is a moment where you feel relaxed, offline, you're not stressing about things, whatever you do that feels like a mental break that's very intentional, that it fills your cup rather than empties your cup in terms of energy that you have, bandwidth that you have, then it's self-care. So how do we do it? Setting realistic expectations with colleagues and other stakeholders. So this is a skill that many people who are new in their profession really struggle with, and understandably. But with practice, it actually becomes easier. If you have the kind of job that most people in these roles are salaried, and most people in these roles, it tends to be a more white collar context. So if that doesn't apply to you, that's okay. There's other ways to do this. But if that does apply to you, and on Thursdays, you need to leave at 4:45 to catch a yoga class. Maybe you need to make up that 15 minutes elsewhere. You know what it's like at your workplace, and that's fine. You will come in the 15 minutes earlier that morning. But if you want to put on your calendar that you leave at that time every week, barring true emergencies, true like time sensitive things that you need to stay later, treating it like an obligation that's as firm as your commitments to your colleagues, your boss, your clients. That to some people lands as a revolutionary statement, and I get it, but it does take practice. And what studies have shown is that if you model this strictly as a boundary for yourself, other people respect it more than if you're wobbly about it. Like, oh, I come in 15 minutes early on Thursdays and I leave 15 minutes early on Thursdays. Once you have the all clear from your boss on that, just having that be what it is and not making apologies for it, not making excuses for it, and not wavering unless it's a true emergency, then suddenly people don't question it. If you present that as like, oh yeah, I know I can't believe I do that, then people start to judge it. Something to try, a little thought experiment there is just being firmer with those boundaries and seeing that sort of respect for your own boundaries is contagious. Very difficult to do. As I mentioned earlier about the yoga example, I don't know why I'm stuck on yoga today. I don't even do yoga, but yoga is the common self-care thing. But the example before about if you miss one, okay, no big deal, that's life. If you haven't gone in 6 months, that's a warning sign here. Same thing with self-care. There are seasons in our work lives where it gets harder to do this, and that is okay. Being aware you're in one of those seasons, and as soon as the opportunity arises to take a little break from that and get back to a more balanced life, then you take that opportunity. Flows really right into this next section here, work-life balance. So keeping boundaries from work while you're off duty. Some people are in jobs when they leave work, that's the end of their responsibilities for work. Many American workers do not have that as their reality. They are expected to be responsive to phone calls, to emails at truly all hours. I am not a stranger to this. I started my legal career at a big law firm where if I got an email at midnight on Saturday night, that it was expected that I was responsive to that. Not everybody's in those fields. Many blessings to you if you are not, but if you are in one of those fields, some of this is a challenge for sure. However, finding times in your life where you are not on your phone, even if the expectation is that you pop back on. So you're leaving work, you leave the office at 6 p.m., you're making dinner, you're cleaning your house, you're putting your kids to bed, whatever it is, you're going to play in or watch a kid's baseball game with the expectation that at 8:30, you're going to log back into your laptop. That's the reality for many workers. That's a challenging reality, but it is not one that we cannot work within and still maintain work-life balance. The idea being that for a certain time in every day, your phone is really and truly off. So you're putting your kid to bed and you leave your phone in the kitchen. You don't take it with you. Even if you know your phone's in the kitchen and you got to go answer that email that came in inevitably while you were in putting your kid to bed, as a matter of how our nervous system reacts, how our amygdala gets triggered, having it on you, hearing that buzz, feeling that buzz in your back pocket is really, really unhealthy if you never, ever take a break from it. So carving out those special times. If you are in a profession that you can actually take vacations and not bring your work laptop, definitely take advantage of that. There is a recipe for burnout if you are the one person in your office who does take their laptop with them on vacation, and that's not the expectation. If it is the expectation that you take your laptop with you on work, that's fine. Same thing, finding windows of the day that you can actually fully unplug and give your nervous system a break, or else you're going to live in fight or flight, and that is a recipe for burnout there. Consider commemorating your end of your work day, end of your work week in a way that signals to your body, I'm off now. I'm actually off. Even, again, if you have to log back in, still taking that signifier for yourself so that your body knows, okay, it's time to relax here. So for some people, it's like, I've got a 5-minute drive commute home. I listen to a meditation, not one that encourages sleeping because that would be unsafe, but a breathing exercise on my drive home. Or I listen to Drake. What a controversial example for me to land on. We're going to go with Taylor Swift. I listen to Taylor Swift on top volume on my way home. And I do it every day. And that's how I tell my heart, my mind, my body that I'm done for now. If you work from home, this is even more important. Jumping jacks in your living room, something that makes a really overt display to your nervous system, done now, so that you're not carrying that feeling of being at work, which for some people is a constant state of physical stress. You're not carrying with that with you all day. Again, there's going to be seasons of life where this is harder than other times. Paying attention to it, noticing when it starts to get bad, and making a concerted effort to show up differently for yourself. That's the name of the game. So the next couple things get a little nitty gritty. So we're going to stay high level with the shameless plug that a lot of this work here needs professional assistance at certain seasons of our life. It's helpful to work through it with somebody who speaks this language and does it every day. Cognitive behavioral strategies. So anxiety, we actually didn't use anxiety as a defined term here, but it overlaps with a lot of the concepts we've discussed. One of the most evidence-backed ways to deal with anxiety is this idea of cognitive behavioral therapy. The idea is that our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, there's a cognitive behavioral triangle. Our thoughts, our feelings, our behaviors are interconnected, and becoming more aware of our thoughts and our feelings can help impact our behavior and just improve our wellness overall. It's really applicable for anxiety. So how this shows up in the workplace, and certainly I invite you all to consider working with a professional if you're struggling with this, but you can do it on your own as well. Recognizing the ways in which our thoughts lie to ourselves. A lot of times people who are really perfectionists in their career, really hard workers, really ambitious, struggle with something called cognitive distortions, which is when our brain lies to ourselves. Catastrophizing. I got an annual review that had 5 really positive things and one thing to work on. I'm going to get fired. The one thing to work on is I'm going to get fired. I just know it. That's catastrophizing, right? You're seeing the worst and your brain is going there. It's a lie. It's not true. It's not rooted in reality. And even if it is, thinking that way isn't going to help you. Challenging them. That's not actually true. Keep a journal. I had this thought that I was going to get fired. Here's the evidence that supports that. Spoiler alert, there's not much. Here's the evidence that counteracts that. And you can kind of coach yourself to stop lying to yourself. Black and white thinking, all or nothing. This makes you a really bad employee. Let's say you're in the position of negotiating something and you think, I'm really not going to be happy with an outcome unless I get everything I want. That doesn't serve you well because that's not really true. Same thing in your own life where it's all or nothing. I am ranked number 1 among the sales staff, or I'm a failure. That's black or white thinking. Fortune telling, predicting the future based on some facts. This happened, and so I know this, that, all these things are going to happen. You actually have no idea. You're just guessing, but you're working yourself up and having a little bit of a stress reaction. So challenging those thoughts, becoming aware of those thoughts, writing them down, talking to a professional about them to kind of interrupt those unhealthy thought patterns that produce anxiety. And then I've said this already, getting help, not waiting for stress to become debilitating to enlist the help of a mental health professional. So when we talk about burnout, if you're there already, that's a great time to talk to somebody. If you're not there, but you feel yourself on the slippery slope there, also a great time to talk to a professional. Resources tab for additional information. And there it is, suggested resources. So if you're interested in finding an individual therapist to work through some of your workplace stress, work-life balance issues, a website I often recommend is Psychology Today. I like it because you can kind of do a search for therapists in your area by do they take your insurance? If it's important to you that there are certain age, gender, race, sexual orientation, you can sort by all those things. You can also sort by particular specialties. So I have on here searching for trauma-informed clinicians is great. That's certainly the case if you are a healthcare provider or a teacher or somebody who's really interacting with traumatic situations involving people we serve often. Other things to search for are people who specialize in career coaching. I would still recommend that you search for a mental health professional to do some of the work that's mental healthy, even though it's showing up in the workplace. And then another place is checking your insurance provider's patient portal. So if you have Cigna, Anthem, whatever, you go in, you log into your patient portal, and then you know your whoever you find is covered by your insurance, so it's going to be helpful. Relying on your community, professional associations are a great place. Faith-based or other community groups. The idea of isolation as an early warning sign of burnout, forcibly counteracting that by getting out with people who have some commonality with you, work-wise or otherwise. That can be a really great protective factor if you're starting to feel the effects of burnout. Wellness apps, we talked about Calm or Headspace. I also have a huge plug for this other one called Finch, which is the silliest thing in the world where you like adopt a bird and you can get treats and accessories for your bird by doing certain self-care tasks. So it's like, oh, I went for a walk today, or I meditated today, or like you put it in the app and they give you points and then you buy a hat for your bird. It sounds ridiculous. It is such a good mental health thing. Couple books. Lipsky and Burke have Trauma Stewardship, which is just kind of the Bible about self-care, particularly if you're in one of those helping professions that I mentioned, but it can be helpful regardless. How do you care for yourself when you're caring for others? How do you care for yourself when you're exerting yourself in service of others? And then Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers is a, believe it or not, actually humorous, very clinical and scientific, but also humorous take about like how does stress show up in the body? What are those long-term impacts on our health? Again, a little fear-mongery, but it's a good book. And then your employer, you may have access to an EAP, take advantage of it. Workplace affinity groups are also an excellent way to talk to people who may be feeling the same things and kind of create a safe space for yourself. And with that, my rambling is wrapping up, and we are going to have a little Q&A. I think the questions are going to get funneled through Matt. So I'm here for any questions you may have.
All right, that was great, Taylor. Thank you. I'm definitely gonna have to check out that Finch app. That looks interesting. I'm excited about that. But yeah, no, we definitely do have a few questions for you. We'll get started with how can employees advocate for boundaries without risking their job or reputation?
Yeah. So not naive about the fact that in some workplaces, working yourself silly is rewarded, and drawing those boundaries can be looked upon poorly. That's definitely a reality. So some key ways to think about it is through the lens of kind of pitching it to your employer, as like an assumption, like, of course, I am going to come in late on Mondays because I have my therapy appointment. Yes, I will work later in the week. Of course, this is going to be okay with you. So the confidence behind that tends to go a long way. And then even more than that, being proactive and pitching it as something that it benefits the employer too. So framing boundaries as productivity tools, like I need to be off on Sunday in order to show up as my best self on Monday. And just making it kind of a non-negotiable that way, using collaborative language. So positioning your boundaries as team aligned. To stay responsive, I need to log off by 6 p.m., but I will be checking messages by 8 a.m. tomorrow. You're modeling consistency here, something about what I talked about like having something on your calendar and treating it as non-negotiable. Oftentimes people just kind of, by osmosis, treat them as non-negotiable as well. And then communication, early and often, early and clear. You're experiencing a little bit of burnout, your productivity is taking a toll, rather than saying to your boss, I know this was due an hour ago, but I didn't get it done. I've got too much on my plate. That tends to not be very well received. If it's, I know I have this deadline in 2 weeks, but I've had X, Y, and Z to get done before then. I anticipate it's going to be a tight deadline. How would you like me, boss, to prioritize these things so that I can meet the business's needs here?
Great. And then how do remote work arrangements affect work-life balance?
So remote work, much more common than it used to be, although I guess we're all getting called back into the offices. Lots of benefits to work-life balance. No commuting time. You can be a little bit more flexible. You can move that load of laundry in the workday. A little bit more autonomy. Lots of upsides that can really promote wellness. But it also can have a negative impact. A blurred separation of work and life, right? If you are working in a home office, it can be very challenging to tell your brain and your body that the workday is over. So it's being intentional about what your norms are. For some people, this really works really well, as in like, I'm working from home and I don't have to be on video, so I'm just going to stay in my PJs. Well, then you log up for the day and you're in your PJs, but your PJs are kind of your work clothes, and your brain and body never gets really the clear demarcation between the two things. So I would recommend to people that you still put on work clothes and still take work clothes off at the end of the day, that you do something to clearly commemorate the beginning and end of your workday to the extent possible, and that you have set work hours. If you have set work hours because you were going to the office, those are still your set workout hours, even though your office is around the corner in your apartment or your house. Yeah.
Well, we got a couple more for you. Um, what's the difference between stress and actual burnout?
Yeah.
Is there a difference?
So yeah, I see it as, I sometimes no, and we use the phrase interchangeably, right? But the way that I think about it is chronic versus passing. So short-term stress tied to specific stressors and demands. Stress is good, right? We're talking a little smack on the amygdala, but sometimes the amygdala serves us well because it's got that quick response time, and a little bit of stress can motivate us to get through something. Burnout is when it becomes chronic and unproductive. Burnout is when it's not actually a specific thing. There's nothing, you can't say, oh, this particular project is the reason I'm feeling stressed. It's just your work generally. It's cumulative. It's not going to pass without intervention by you. And it can really adversely impact your work performance.
So this one's from the chat here. So you see the problem we have, but having no idea how to decrease the workload. Honestly, the only way I can feel that I will be able to stop is if I end up in the hospital. How do you find a path to change? Contact contact staff of one at a nonprofit, so the bosses are the board.
The bosses of the board. Yeah, very, very difficult to do, especially in mission aligned workplaces, nonprofits where you feel like if your job is something that you feel very strongly about as an ethical and moral matter, it can make drawing these boundaries feel radically selfish. So that is a really challenging setting in which to establish workplace boundaries. And if you have no boss to negotiate with and to set the clear boundaries with, that's even more challenging. I would say if the board is who you report to, then they are your boss for purposes of this discussion. And it may feel silly to go to a nonprofit board about your workload because that's kind of the day-to-day stuff that they're not really intended to advise on. But in this context, there's no other choice. And the same rules apply, as challenging as it is to implement those boundaries, where you can present to them, okay, here's the priorities that as I understand them. Here's how many hours are in a day. Or even better, here's how many hours I'm expected contractually or just by workplace culture to work. I'm not anticipating that there's enough hours in that time to accomplish this. Can you please advise me on priorities with the understanding that certain things will have to fall away? I'm not saying that that is an easy conversation, but I'm saying that the cost of not having that is probably greater than you'd be willing to pay over time. If we're at the point where we're saying the only solution here is to end up in the hospital, that would be a time that I would actually strongly recommend reaching out to a professional for some assistance with this. And I'm not being alarmist. A lot of people go through periods of time where they're like, have these fantasies of something happening to them that they no longer have to work. Or they don't, this deadline miraculously disappears because you've broken a leg or something. But if we're at that point, that's the anxiety speaking, that's definitely burnout. And it's time to enlist some specific advice tailored to you to help you navigate that.
A couple more comments. Do you have suggestions for organizations that want to integrate mental health training into their onboarding or employee development?
Yeah, definitely. So onboarding wise, that can be challenging. So if you are an employer who this is a priority for and you do not have an EAP program, I would recommend that you look into getting one right away because that's such an easy automated way to make sure that your employees have an outlet of somebody to resources available to them. In the onboarding, it can be part of the cultural communication where it is acknowledged as part of an employee handbook. Like this is a priority for us. Some employers, particularly in high stress professions that really value mental health, have a policy that, okay, if you're supposed to work 40 hours a week as a salary, 1 hour a week you can use in service of your personal therapy appointment or 1 hour a week volunteering, which is something sometimes really helpful as a coping skill for people to help come outside of themselves and take a break from work stress, including it in your hours that you have for your employees. Quarterly webinars about specific topics, much like this one. That's also an excellent way to kind of institutionally recognize wellness as a priority for your employees. And having it be a metric by which employees are evaluated, that is not to say, oh, you're working too hard, your bonus is gonna be docked. That's not productive. But as in requiring some employers require a self-evaluation. The section, how are you taking care of yourself? Just to show that you're paying attention to that.
I know we're getting close to time, but I do have one more for you.
Yeah.
how can managers identify signs of burnout in remote employees when you can't see the signs as easily as compared to in-office employees? How do you go about that?
Yeah. One real low hanging fruit is a poor performance out of character with consistent of what you're seeing. That can be a warning sign. We ideally don't want it to get to there. If you have a weekly check-in with a remote employee, having a specific item on your agenda where you ask those questions and actually listen to the answer, and react accordingly, that's the easiest way.
Well, sorry for running a little bit over, everybody. I really do appreciate you guys joining us today. Taylor, thank you for all of this wonderful information. I'm definitely excited to use a lot of it myself here, and really do appreciate your time, and thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much, Matt, and for Laura for organizing. Thank you all for being here.